You might say, it's all well and good, ChiChi, all this good stuff you're saying, I get it. But the reality is that I'm living with pressure from my family, from my church, from my friends, from society in general. And I will admit that's real.
Hey, you're welcome. We're so glad you joined us today. We are looking today at a topic that's very, very important to us, and that's the joys and challenges of being single. We talk here a lot about marriage, and that's because we love marriage.
Sure.
And we
enjoy it.
And we enjoy it. We enjoy our marriage, and we would love every married person to enjoy their marriage.
Yeah, and at the same time, we have many people around us who are single.
Yeah.
Single for different reasons.
Some have never been married. They're looking forward to getting married.
Yeah.
Some are not even thinking of getting married. They're enjoying their single state.
And some are widowed.
Yeah. Some are widowed. Some are divorced. Just many different reasons why people are single.
Sure.
Whether you're just curious about the single life, recently single, or you've been flying solo for a while, this video will be of interest to you.
Today, we are bringing a very special guest, someone very close to our hearts.
Yeah. ChiChi is our wonderful friend and sister. If you've been on this channel for a while, you must have met her. Today, ChiChi is here in this video sharing some amazing insights from her single journey.
For me, one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my life in the last decade, maybe a bit more, is being single. And I'm talking about being single, not even we were single and then we were in a relationship and then we broke up. No, just in the last, at least in the last 10 years, no relationship. And that has been a roller coaster to navigate, if I'm being honest. It hasn't been an easy ride. It's had its downs. I will own that. I will confess that. It's had its ups, but when you think about being single, especially for Christian women who really want to honor God, want to honor that institution of marriage and wait, it gets very, very challenging. It's harder compared to someone who isn't Christian or who doesn't have this kind of values that you have, that you're trying to uphold. And so for me, it has been a journey. I've had moments and seasons, in fact, of just being depressed. Not clinically depressed, no, but that's one thing that has stolen my joy in the past and has actually withheld my joy for long periods of time, because I focus on what I don't have, which is a spouse, rather than focusing on what I do have, which is a lot of so many other things. I've got family that supports me unconditionally. I have friends, I have a job, I have comforts that I know a lot of other people don't have. But the truth is that when you're thinking about what you don't have, it's hard to see the things that you do have unless you are intentional about that journey. And so I've had moments when, and seasons in fact, when I've gone into depression and just thinking, God, why am I still single? Nothing is going right in my life. This isn't working, that's not working, nothing is working at all. And just having those moments, and even sometimes lashing out at God and saying, why are you doing this to me? I love you, you know that I love you, I serve you faithfully, but I don't seem to see any fruit of that service and that love. I have had moments like that, and it's got to a point where I actually started to find or determine or identify, that's the word, identify what my triggers are. What are the things that trigger these emotional roller coasters that I go through in what seemed like cycles at the time, and how can I manage that and just bring my emotions in check. There's something the Bible says, the Bible talks about bringing every thought under the authority of Jesus Christ. That's something that St. Paul said, and I really do believe that that's scripture that we take into warfare in our minds, with our minds, because our minds are going to bring so many different thoughts to us, but we have to bring all those thoughts under authority and to submit those thoughts to Jesus Christ. And so when I started realizing what those triggers were, for me, I actually started doing some practical things to steer clear of them. So one that I would just highlight very quickly is, I am a reader. I've always been a reader. I started reading as a very, very young girl, maybe 4. I know by the time, as far as I can remember, by the time I was 5 years old, I was reading in Igbo language, not even English. My family read the Bible in our native language. So I started reading the Igbo Bible. I was already reading in English by that age, and I was starting to learn to read in Igbo. So I started reading very early, and I was always, as a small child and growing up, a voracious reader. I loved reading, still do. And one of my favorite genres to read is romantic fiction. I just love romance. I love stories about love, and you know, God is love. My Father is love, so it makes sense that I love stories about love. But I started realizing that when I would read these stories, and it didn't happen all the time, but sometimes when I read these stories that talk about romantic love, I would read something on a page and suddenly I just start feeling so depressed. Oh my gosh, look at this beautiful love story that I'm reading. There's no love in my life. And I'm not even kidding you, I go into extreme emotional turmoil and I just get depressed. And you know, sometimes I'll just lie in my bed for days. If I'm not working, I'm just lying in my bed, or if I'm not studying, I'm just lying in my bed and I'm crying, or I'm just thinking about what should have been that isn't, you know, just going through all of that stuff. And it would take me a while to come out of that. And so I wouldn't talk to friends. I would hardly talk to my family, just really being on my own and going through this emotional journey, this destructive emotional journey on my own. And it happened so many times, like really it was a cycle. And I remember the day that I got my freedom from that. I was reading again one of those romantic stories, and I'd gotten to a point in the book and I could just feel that emotional change starting to happen. It's like, you know, when you start to fall sick, when you have a cold or something, you start to feel the symptoms. Maybe your throat becomes dry, you start coughing a little bit, or you start sniffling. So the symptoms is the same with depression. The symptoms are there as well. So I started to sense the symptoms, and I remember, honestly, I felt like in that moment, I closed my eyes and I fought a spiritual battle in like 2 seconds. Because the thing that I heard myself say was, I don't have time for this. And the moment I said that to myself, I feel like my spirit heard me say that. And I found myself just pulling myself out of that hole that I'd started entering. And I just dropped that book. I stopped reading it. I said, no, if this is what it is, then I'm not interested. I'm not reading this book anymore. So then I realized that the things that I read actually are big triggers for me. The things that I see are big triggers as well. And even the things that I listen to. And so I started paying attention to those things and spotting where the triggers are, types of things that I read that trigger that emotional response. And I started to consciously, very intentionally avoid them. And so that has been, I feel like when it comes to being single, that was the moment that I fought my biggest battle. And since then, God, my joy jealously. And it is, that extends especially to my journey as a single woman. I got that joy jealously, and my peace of mind, I just want to protect it. And so anything that I see that seems to be crawling towards my joy to kind of tamper with it, I just steer clear of it. And it also includes conversations, because sometimes, especially single ladies, especially Christian women, we have our women's circles, and sometimes you find yourself with other single women and you're talking about, oh, we're still single and we're still waiting, we're trusting God with this, with that. And to be honest, sometimes those conversations are encouraging. It's good to talk to people who are traveling on the same road that you're on, and to encourage each other. But sometimes it can be detrimental. And so I also try to steer clear of conversations about being single that I know will be detrimental to me. And I just say no to them. I shut them down. I'm not even going there, because look, you have to protect your joy. You have to protect your peace, because the enemy will come. He will keep trying to steal it. And as long as you give him an inch, he's going to take a whole mile. He's going to take it and he's going to run with it. He's going to do a relay with your emotions and with your peace of mind. And so you really have to guard that jealously. For me, that's what I do. I've had issues situations where I've said to a friend, no, I don't want to have that conversation, because I know is not at that point for me. It's going to be a trigger. It's not going to be an uplifting conversation. So for me, yeah, I find that helps. And really just being in the present. Look, everything that I talked about when it comes to finding joy and, protecting that joy, it also applies to being single and how you navigate that. Really just finding the things that make you happy. For me, practicing gratitude, remembering the things that God has done. I keep a journal. I've kept a journal for years. So sometimes I would go back to those journals just to read history. What are the things that I prayed about? And then realize, God has answered that prayer. I didn't even remember I prayed about this. And sometimes I'm writing letters to God, letters of gratitude, prayer, anything like that. And I like going back. It's what really God said to Moses, write these things down, right? And said the same to Joshua as well, write these things down so that these people will remember, and their children and their children's children will remember. It's so important for us to write down those things that God is doing in our lives and the things that we're expecting him to do in our lives, because you might look at those things you wrote down 5-10 years down the line, you realize, God answered that prayer a long time ago. I didn't even remember that I was praying for it for a season. So for me, that book of remembrance, those journals, for me, those are books of remembrance, and going back there to remember God's goodness, I find that so enriching in my life. And really finding ways to serve other people. I serve in my local church. I find opportunities to volunteer, doing things that I love, enjoying nature and going on walks and exploring. I also love traveling, so I plan trips, whether it's a weekend away or a long trip. Sometimes I just travel to visit my family, my mom, my siblings and their families. Anything that makes me happy, as long as that is within reason, of course, that is affordable. I don't borrow money to do the things that make me happy and plan for them. So making sure that I'm filling my life with those things as well. And surrounding yourself with people, not just people who are in the season that you're in, but also even looking at people who are in the season that you're desiring to be in. And I'm going to talk about this a bit more in my next video.
Yes, ChiChi spoke as if it's her channel. In my next video. Well, ChiCi indeed has a YouTube channel. It's called Gracefully You, and we've left the description to it. It's called Gracefully You. We have left the link to ChiCi's channel in the description. We're indeed expecting a next video from her.
And in that video, I'm going to talk about how I navigate those relationships with my friends, both those who are single and those who are married, because all these people contribute to my life. They're part of my life and a part of my journey, part of my story. And for me, they all matter. So I'm not going to tell you that being single, especially if you're a mature woman, you're already in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, is easy. It's not. It's challenging. But there's so much happening in our lives, so much more. I mean, why would you focus just on this one thing that hasn't happened yet when there's so much more that God is doing and God has done in your life that you can be thankful for?
We thought somebody would wonder if ChiCi faces any external pressure.
Now, you might say, it's all well and good, Chimezie, all this good stuff you're saying, I get it. But the reality is that I'm living with pressure from my family, from my church, from my friends, from society in general. And I will admit that's real. Those pressures when you're single, especially when you're more mature single, say in your 30s or your 40s, those pressures are real. And I'm not going to downplay that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I would say in my own experience, I've had to navigate some of that. Some from family and some from just really honestly, a lot of times it's from people who actually do mean well. And I would say that understanding that, first of all, they are coming from a very good place. That's helped me to have grace and patience for people who ask you questions like, why are you still single? What's happening? Is there anyone on the horizon? Or as my people would say, the Igbos would say, which means when are we coming to drink palm wine? You know, they ask all those kinds of questions and they really do mean well. So with family, one of the things that I've had to do is to actually sit down to have conversations with loved ones who have asked me those questions or who have mounted pressure to say, oh, you need to make a decision, you need to find someone, you need to this, and just say, look, that pressure is not helping at all. I don't appreciate it. Of course, say it in a way that really shows that you value and you love them, but you need them to take a step back because you are already dealing with a lot of internal pressures yourself. I will tell you, I'm already dealing with a lot of pressure that I'm putting on myself. It really doesn't help me if that pressure is also coming externally. So sit down and have a one-to-one conversation. I know that moms are notorious for having those kinds of conversations or asking their daughters, especially those kinds of questions. And personally, I just sat down with my mom and I said, Mom, this isn't quite working for me. A, B, and C reasons why it's not working for me. I would love for you to keep praying for me, but please don't put that pressure. And then there's all these other people who ask you questions, or when you catch up with friends or family members that you haven't spoken to in a while, there's always this elephant in the room question. So what's happening in the relationship department? And I've actually started telling people off. One of the things that I say, especially to friends who ask me that question is, look, if you've never introduced me to a guy before, you have no right to ask me that question. That's it. I put it out there. So if you want to have the right to ask me about my relationship status, make an effort to show me that you are actually invested in it and not just looking for gossip. So yeah, this is what has worked for me. I would also admit that I have that additional fortune of living overseas because I'm not in Nigeria and interacting with the kinds of people who will initiate these kinds of conversations on a daily basis. There's less likelihood of me feeling that pressure on a daily basis. So I don't take that for granted. I acknowledge that that's an advantage that I have compared to some other people who would be in my shoes, but are living in the society where this pressure comes day in, day out. I'll also tell you, I've had to deal with disrespect because I look younger than my age. I'm not wearing a ring on my finger. And I've had people say in Nigeria, for example, I've walked into banks and people have treated me with disrespect and with almost disdain, just because they think, oh, this girl is beneath me. Or, you know, I've had issues like that when I've actually had to like do a bit of drama to let them know, no, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. I don't attend to every single issue or every single incident. I don't give attention to every single incident. If I think that there's a lesson to be learned, yes, I might give attention to it, but otherwise I just let those things wash over me and I move on. Because look, life is too short. I can't be having these very uneducated conversations with every single person that I interact with that disrespects me because of what they think of me. I really don't have time for that. I'd rather just move on. I will tell you though, that when I go to banks in Nigeria now, I'm careful not to dress casually, because when I dress casually, people think, oh, she's really young. There's no ring on her finger. She's a very small girl. So now I wear suits. No, I do a power dress up before I walk into banks in Nigeria, just to make sure that, you know, that's my own way of navigating that kind of environment. Of course, not all banks and not all people who work in banks do this, but I've had a few occasions where I've experienced that kind of disrespect of people just speaking to me or even just disregarding me completely. And I've thought, okay, I need to change the way that I come across. So find out your issues, the challenges that you face in this stage of your life could be different from mine. Ask yourself, what are the things that I could do to mitigate some of those kinds of situations? But with the people who are close to you, your loved ones, members of your family, friends, yes, set those boundaries, have the conversations that you need to have. Or look, you can just choose not to answer a question. You don't have to answer every single person who asks you about your relationship status. Sometimes you need to help people draw the line because they don't know where the line is. Yeah.